learning, and sometimes we come down too hard on change. And sometimes we don't get to learn actual deep content and deep Torah because we're beyond it. We haven't taken time to engage with it. And I really hope to bring that balance of tradition and change back into our day schools, particularly into the tefillah world, into the world of prayer. I love and value tefillah and prayer, and hope to spend some time in day schools and in synagogues focusing on re-engaging young people and what it means to pray, what it means to connect to yourself, to your community, to God. How do we use our text to do that? How do we use our scripture to do that? So that was a lot about me. It's a pleasure to share. I don't know if any of you ever feel this way. It's everybody loves to talk about themselves. It's easiest to talk about yourself, and it's also especially on Zoom when you're speaking with people that you don't know or that you've never gotten a chance to hear from. It's a little bit it's just a funny feeling. So I really appreciate all of the very affirming smiles and nods, and I'm grateful that you're listening and interested in my story. So it's 5:47 or 7:47 for you. I was thinking we could learn a little Torah together to wrap up some of the things I brought up when I talked about myself. And then I wanted to open the floor to just your questions and to conversation. So I think what I'll do is I'll share my screen in order to show you the text. But first, I'll give you a little background to what I'm going to teach. So let me just make this a little bigger for myself so that when we get to the presenting time, there we go. Okay. So last week in all of our virtual shuls, we may have taken a peek at Parshat Yitro, and that was the parsha we were learning last week, Parshat Yitro. And what happens in Parshat Yitro? We receive the 10 Commandments. Moses has trekked up the mountain, Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, has received revelation, has received a Torah, and is about to come back down the mountain to give it to Bnei Israel. A few episodes in between, right, that I may have left out for narrative purposes, but here we are. That's the gist of the story. That's where we are in the Torah last week. And I want to take a look at one pasuk, at one verse in particular, and bring back this idea of tradition and change. And then we're going to take a look at one pasuk, one verse from this week's parsha that we'll be reading in shul, in synagogues all week, Parshat Mishpatim. And then we can do some conversation. I'm going to ask questions along the way, so get ready. Okay. I'll just present this, and then I'll ask for you to tell me if you can see that. How's that? Great. Okay. So I'll read the verse, and then I want to spend some time talking about it. So the verse from Parshat Yitro, last week's parsha, is from Exodus 19:19, and it goes like this: Vayehi kol hashofar holech v'chazek me'od. Moshe yedaber v'ha'elohim ya'anenu v'kol. Now I'm going to try my hand at translating, but you'll notice I'm going to run into a problem. So Moses, if you can picture it, is standing on Har Sinai. He's receiving revelation from God, right? God is revealing to Moses the contents of the Torah, and this is what our text has to report about this event. The blare of the horn grew louder and louder. Okay, so there's this loud blaring sound happening while God is giving Moses Torah. And as Moses spoke, God answered him, Elohim Ya'anenu, and then there's this word vekol, with a kol. Now I had some trouble translating that word. Does it mean that God answers Moses bekol, like kol shofar, like we hear on Rosh Hashanah, the sound of a blast of a horn, or the thunderous sort of sound, a blasting sound? You can almost think of it like, is that the noise that God answers Moses in, that God speaks to Moses in? Or is it kol like voice? When we say in modern Hebrew, oh, you have a kol yafeh me'od, you have such a beautiful voice. That's your speaking voice. That's English, or whatever language Moses spoke. That's a voice with language, with words that Moses could hear. So however we translate this word kol, makes a big difference. It could be that God was talking to Moses with a sound that sounds something like this thunder, this, but it also could be, depending on how we translate this word kol, that God answered or spoke to or gave revelation to Moses in a voice just like this, like I'm speaking with you, clear words, language. Okay. So I don't know, it might be a surprise to you, it might not be, but the Torah is very ambiguous. It constantly is contradicting itself. Okay, this causes a big problem for the rabbis, for our sages, who want to tell us that every word is up from the Torah is divine and it all has to mean the same thing and it all has to coalesce and make sense, and right? It's a big problem for the rabbis. I want to argue that the Torah is ambiguous and sometimes contradicts, but it's purposefully so. It's trying to teach us a lesson. When it contradicts itself or when it's ambiguous, it's trying to teach us a lesson. So I want to ask you, and feel free, I can't see all of you on my screen, but I would love for one or two of you to answer the questions, if you can. No wrong answers, no judgment-free zone, but I just want to know what you think when you hear this. If the word kol means thunder, how do you think Moses understood God's commandments? And if the word kol means a human voice in language, then how do you think Moses could have understood God's commandments? And if you're feeling so inclined to ponder, why might it matter? I can't see all of you, so just feel free to unmute and
well, if God spoke in a human voice, maybe Moses couldn't hear him as well as if he spoke with a thunderous voice, which would make more meaning. It would come out more important, like it was something that was very important for Moses to hear.
Beautiful. So Miriam's hitting on, maybe it's about the volume. Maybe the ambiguity of the word is telling us something about the volume, about the importance. That's a great. I want to write a midrash on that. I want that to be recorded somewhere. That's a beautiful way of seeing it. I'm thinking when I think of thunder and of words, I'm thinking a little bit less about volume, and I'm thinking more about style. Like what happens when I'm angry and I yell, "Ugh!" versus when I'm angry and I yell, "Hey, you!" in English language. Or what happens when I'm sad and I'm just versus, "Oh, that really hurt." You know, what kind of sense do we get when it's a noise versus when it's English language?
I think if God spoke in thunder, it's frightening. I don't think the lesson would be imparted the same way as if he or she spoke in a loud voice, but a language that Moshe could understand. To me, the thunder, it would scare Moses, it would scare the people, and they may not want to listen to any of it.
On the other hand, maybe there isn't a voice, and maybe there isn't a thunder. Maybe it's something in his head. Just like you had a little voice in your head saying maybe you should be a rabbi. Maybe Moses heard, in quotation marks, the voice of God in his head. And the more he paid attention, the louder it got, so that he had to obey whatever it was. But there wasn't anything outside of him, it was in his head. It was where we get ideas, our own thoughts from. Isn't
Just
that
beautiful, Anna, Noreen, Marion. This Torah that you're bringing is so powerful and beautiful. And thank you for sharing it, Anna. Something that you said really sparked and leads really nicely into what I was hoping to share, what I was hoping to bring. This is all really powerful Torah, really powerful. Anna, you said something like what Moses heard for himself, right? Like that maybe it wasn't out loud, but that Moses heard something himself. Well, I want to argue that maybe it wasn't. Maybe Anna's spot on, and that it wasn't out loud, and it was Moses himself. But I also want to argue that maybe it was out loud, but in words that were unclear to Moses, and so Moses had to do that thing that happens inside our heads and interpret what the voice, what the sound, what the thunder was trying to say. So I wrote an essay on this for a class this past semester, and I'd like to share with you a paragraph of the essay that I think really summarizes the points, and hopefully it will be clear and we can make the points stronger. I'll read it out loud. I want you to be able to see it in case you like to follow along. So, if God spoke in words with English language, or whatever language Moses could understand, then Moses' part in Revelation is one of relaying a message to the people of Israel. If the message relayed was true to God's speech, then the laws handed down must be rigid and unchanging for all time, right? If God said to me in plain language, Lara, you have to wake up every morning at 7 o'clock, pretty clear to me what I have to do. I have to wake up every morning at 7 o'clock. But if God spoke in something that sounded like thunder, if God spoke and it sounded like then Moses himself must have played the role of interpreter and translator, not just relayer, but interpreter during the events of Revelation. And this may give our own interpretation much greater latitude and agency today. If this is the case, if Moses was an interpreter of God's voice rather than just a relayer of clear information, then just as Moses, a man living in the context of the Bronze Age, interpreted the word of God, so too can we, so too can I, a woman in 2021, find ways to reinterpret and re-engage in that thunderous sound of God's laws through our own lenses, effectively establishing Revelation as a process that requires our continued modern interpretation rather than just a one-time and static event. So if Moses just hears plain English, all he has to do is walk down Mount Sinai and tell Bnei Israel, listen, this is what I just heard, exactly word for word. Here you go. This is the law. Unchanging, rigid, can't do anything about it. This is what I heard. But if Moses hears and has to think, what did God mean by that? Has to interpret each noise, each note. And then when he walks down the mountain, he says, look, Bnei Israel, I didn't really hear anything super clear from God. I heard like whatever I thought I heard, and here's what I thought I heard. But I'm an interpreter, and you know what? So are you. And I'll tell you what I heard. And if you can interpret it differently, as long as you're engaging with it authentically, give it a shot. Engage with it too. Interpret it too. Wow, that's really powerful Torah for me. I was pretty touched and blown away. So I want to take us into this week's parsha, and I want to bring it back to Beth David, and then I'm going to open up for some dialogue. So let's take a look at this week's parsha, and then we'll think about how the two psukim, the two verses, compare. So this week we're learning Parshat Mishpatim. We'll read it. We read it yesterday. We'll read it again on Thursday morning, and we'll read it again on Shabbat. Theoretically, I don't know. Every community is doing something different these days on Zoom, but theoretically, I mean, I really miss parading around the Torah and actually opening the scroll and physically reading, but we do what we can this week. So we're here in Parshat Mishpatim. Moses has just walked down a Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, and he is giving the laws to Bnei Yisrael. Okay, he's relaying. He's doing either this process of relaying or interpreting. We're not really sure, but okay. And we're told, Vayikach Sefer Habrit, Vayikra be'oznei ha'am, Vayomru kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh v'nishma. So then he, Moses, took the record of the covenant and read it out loud to the people. So Moses is taking whatever Torah he got from Mount Sinai, whether it was God's words directly or something he interpreted, we're not sure, and he's reading it out loud to the people, and they say, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, and we will understand. Now I want to ask, I wonder if anyone has any thoughts. When Bnei Yisrael say, we will do and we will understand, we will do and we will understand. I just wonder why the order? I'm curious, does one have to do something in order to understand it? Is that better? Or should one understand something before they do it? And I'm just wondering, does one need to do something in order to understand it? And maybe you want to share what's a time that you've done something, a physical act of some sort, in order to better understand it. Have you ever done something and through doing it you understood why or what it's all about?
Yeah, I'll answer on that. Well,
Sure,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think I had the privilege of reading a Torah. You when you read it and you read it again and again and again, you understand it because the more you practice and the more you put into it, I think the more you understand it. So I do think that by doing it, you really, if you put your whole self into it and really give it your all, then you really understand. And and then it works the other way too. By understanding it, you can do a much better job. You can because you understand the message of what you're reading. So. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I think sometimes it's impossible to understand something without really doing it. I can share for myself. I could not understand fill-in before doing it. I just thought, what is this crazy practice? It seems really annoying to have to spend an extra 5 minutes. I'm already spending time praying. I have to spend an extra 5 minutes wrapping these black boxes around my arms and my head. It seems really annoying. Also, no other women are doing it. It's embarrassing for me. I'm the only one. But I feel obligated, and I feel it's an important mitzvah, and also it's an important for me it's important to be a role model and to show young women that they can engage with it too. And so I did it anyways. And only by beginning to do it, I recognized, oh my gosh, it's so clear to me now that every day I should wake up and wrap something around my arm. Wrap something around the arm that does action in the world. And put something on my head that reminds me what I should value, what I should be thinking about throughout the day. Oh, it's so clear to me now. Of course, that's the way I should be starting my day.
But isn't
Everyone
it,
hear me okay?
isn't it experience? Like the more you do something, maybe you understand it differently each time until finally maybe a light bulb goes out and you say, oh, that's what it meant to be, because I've gone over it so many times that now I understand what I'm supposed to do in this particular incident.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Exactly. Finally, it clicks like a light bulb going off. Yeah. Yeah. Marion and Marla, I think you have it. I think this doing sometimes helps us understand and know. And it goes off like a light bulb. And that can't come without doing. Sometimes we really feel like we need to understand something before we do it. Driving a car. Okay, I better understand that before I just jump in the car and do it. But sometimes, maybe when it comes to mitzvot, I can do it without totally understanding and have faith that I will understand it. So I brought these two psukim in last week's parsha and in this week's parsha, in Parshat Yitro and in Parshat Mishpatim, to show us a little bit of a dichotomy, right? When we hear these, that kol, that word kol could mean God's thunderous sound that wasn't language, which gave Moses the opportunity to be an interpreter, which could give agency to our own project of interpretation. We see one way of engaging with Torah. And that is to what? To inquire, to push, to question, to challenge what we're reading and what we're seeing, to bring our own context, just as Moses, the 40-year-old man in the Bronze Age, brought his context into whatever it is that he told Bnei Israel when he came down the mountain. We too can do that act of interpreting. And I also brought us the second verse, the second pasuk, which tells us, and balance that also. Balance that with just hearing Torah and doing your best not to decide what's good for you or what's comfortable for you. Not to say, you know what, tefillin don't really feel so comfortable for me. I'm just going to opt out of that one. But no, to really say, you know what, na'aseh v'nishma. I will do it. I'll try it on. And maybe I'll understand. I'll at least keep myself open to the potential of being changed, of understanding, of growing from something that I don't totally understand. And just to come back to what I was saying about JTS and why I chose to learn it at the Jewish Theological Seminary, and that balance that I feel like JTS is constantly doing between tradition and change, I think that's the same balance that these two psukim are trying to show us about how we learn Torah and how we engage with Jewish life. Bring yourself, our Torah says. Interpret. Bring who you are, because that matters. Be changed, because that matters. And our Torah won't live if it doesn't get changed over time. But also, be tradition. Na'aseh v'nishma, just listen, and then you'll understand, hear the Torah and do it, and then be open to the idea that you might grow, that you might learn, that you might understand from that. And constantly the Torah tells us, it wedges us, these two thoughts, literally next to each other in Parshiot. So one week we read one thing, and the very next week we read another, and it tells us balance. Balance those two things. And the last thing I want to show you is Beth David's logo and I think motto, which says participate, learn, grow. And I found this off the website, so I hope it's right. But I was really struck by this because I think that's what our Torah is telling us. Our Torah is telling us, participate, just do, But don't just participate only by doing, by the na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will know. Also participate by inquiring, asking hard questions, challenging the text, bringing ourselves. And that is how we will be able to learn and grow with Torah. And that's really what I wanted to share with all of you tonight. I want to say that I feel really blessed to have the opportunity every day to be encouraged to participate and learn and grow in both of those ways. And I want to bless you to continue to also learn and participate and grow and balance both of those ways. It's really a pleasure to share with you and to learn Torah with you. And I would love to open up the next little while that we have together for thoughts and questions and on anything. It could be on anything I mentioned. So I don't know, Ellen, if you want a moderator, if you want me to just call on people or whatever's best, I'm happy to do. Me? Okay, great. So I see Anna. Anna, you have a question?
Yes. You say you chose JTS. What other choices did you have?
It's a great question. It's a great question. I was really, in the beginning of my time searching, I really was open to anything. I did grow up in a conservative synagogue, and so the conservative movement was close to me. It felt comfortable. But I hadn't decided my own practice. As I said, I had been a little bit removed from Jewish ritual practice, and I needed to find a home. I looked at HUC, at the Reform Movement schools. I looked at Hebrew College, a non-denominational school in Boston. But when it came down to it, this value of tradition and change I really could only find in the conservative movement. And I was choosing. In the end, I interviewed at both JTS and at Ziegler, and I chose JTS in the end for a lot of different reasons. One of them being that I actually have the pleasure and opportunity to work this summer at Beth Synagogue in Toronto and to work at Camp Ramah, and that was a really big pull for me. But really, I think both of the schools would just offer such wonderful education and are both such great places to learn and grow. And I feel really blessed to be. I wish I could be at both of them. I feel blessed to be at one of them.
Do you see yourself as a congregational rabbi?
Noreen, I probably never before about a year ago would have said yes to that question. I never, even before 4 or 5 years ago, I never would have said yes to being a rabbi at all. But especially when I was in the beginning of my journey toward the rabbinate, I thought, I'm never going to be a pulpit rabbi. For sure, summer camp, Hillel, that's where I'm going to be. But the more that I learn and grow, the more I love pulpit work. I work a lot with couples who are either one partner is looking at converting, or they are looking both together at coming closer toward their Judaism before a big life event like a wedding or a birth of a child. And learning with them about conversion, marriage, Brit Milah, bringing children and into the Jewish people. These rituals are such huge moments for people in their Jewish lives. And it's been really exciting for me to get to work with them. And it makes me think that pulpit work is certainly something that I would be interested in doing down the road.
I think you'll be good.
How close are you to graduating? What year are you in?
Great question. I'm actually only in my first year. So it's a bit of a strange year to be starting because, I haven't been in the physical building. We're just here online. So I'm really hoping that the next 3 years at least will be in person and in the building. But I have a lot of growth and a lot of learning, and I'm just ahead, and I'm just so grateful for all of you for being part of that journey and part of that learning. It's a wonderful opportunity for me.
You're fortunate too that Calgary has a nice Jewish community.
We have a lovely Jewish community. I used to think it was so small, but the more that I actually invest myself in it, the more that I see that it's actually not so small. It's not huge, but it's not so small. Nothing compared to Toronto, of course. But I feel really blessed that I got to grow up here, and I think a huge reason why I chose to do what I'm doing actually is because I was always responsible for doing things Jewishly in the community. Like if I didn't do it, nobody would be there to do it. And I think if I had grown up in a community where there were more people around, more young people who were, you know, articulate, thoughtful, I really don't think that I would have had all of the opportunities to be where I would have been, because it just could have easily have been someone else. But because there were so few of us, if I wasn't there, it was felt, and that mattered in many ways in terms of my growth.
Where did you go to school after Calgary Academy? Like my grandchildren are there now, and I have one that graduated, Adam Silver. I'm sure you know the family. That's my son. Well. And so Hannah found it.
Are campers of mine, and they were my teams in BBYO, and I'm close with your grandkids. They're very sweet. They were at Bialik in Toronto, and then when they moved to Calgary, they went to Calgary Jewish Academy. And then Hannah, when she graduated grade 9, it's like, what do I do? It was like culture shock going into a public school system. Yeah.
And you don't have the same opportunities other than BBYO, or if you go to camp, to meet other Jewish kids.
And Hannah particularly is such a thoughtful and kind kid who really needed a Jewish place to grow.
Yeah, and there was nowhere.
Yeah. It was a culture shock for sure. I'm so grateful for BBYO and for summer camp, because that was the tiny Jewish thread I was hanging on by in public school. I went to Henry Wisewood, which is a public high school that lots of Jewish young people go to, but
I think that's where she went.
Yeah, I think she went there too. But it was certainly a culture shock, and if anything, it made me dive into my learning and my experience at summer camp and BBYO. And I think for that reason too, I am where I am today. Again, if I had a Jewish high school, I would have gone there inevitably, and I would have loved it, and I would have learned a lot. Would I have felt as compelled to take ownership of my Jewish identity? Maybe not. Maybe part of the reason that I felt so compelled to really own and be sort of the author of my own Jewish story, maybe because I didn't have the opportunity just given to me. I had to seek it out. Yeah. Oh, well, I love that connection. I love Adam, and his kids are so sweet. Yes, Doreen, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, according to your father, it was Bashert, so it didn't matter whether you went to public school or Hebrew school.
Right. Yeah.
Well, do you find that being out west, I have 2 children in Vancouver, and my grandson went to King David and he went to Camp Miriam. And I think that the Jewish communities in British Columbia, Alberta, I don't know about Saskatchewan as much, but I know the 2 provinces, they seem to stick together. When something happens, they have an event, they have like 400 people turn up, because it's that Jewish community feeling that they tend to do. Could you talk about that?
Sure. I feel that so much with Edmonton in particular, because the communities in Calgary and Edmonton are so close geographically. We're only a 3-hour drive, and are also just really connected in terms of the way that they choose to raise our kids. We also go on our grade 9 graduating trip to Israel together with the Edmonton grade 9 class, the Calgary kids and the Edmonton kids, and we grow up in BBYO together. We do a lot together. So I certainly felt that between cities, and I think it taught me, I also, as I mentioned, growing up at camp in Vancouver, I did feel connected to the Vancouver Jewish community. I didn't share this, but I was born in Winnipeg, spent the first few years of my life there, and of course my whole family is from and still in Winnipeg, and so I visit often. Some of my closest friends are Winnipeggers. My uncle was the headmaster of the Jewish day school there, so I feel very connected to that community also. And certainly what it's given me is perspective. I think each community has like a little flavor of its own, and I love that each community is independent enough to have its own flavor and its own style. When I worked for BBYO, I saw that. I spent some time as a consultant, and I did work in Winnipeg, Toronto, Vancouver, and here in Calgary. And I got to know that really well with the teams in each of those cities. But I also do love that I feel like the country has sort of like a Jewish communal affinity. I'm working right now with a synagogue in Winnipeg who's looking at teen programming and is looking at partnering with the synagogue I work for here in Calgary, and we're trying to find a way or a moment in the calendar to do that. So it's certainly true that the communities tend to partner, and it feels nice to have that here in Western Canada, where we don't have as much going on as maybe there is in Toronto. So I hope that sort of answered your question.
Mm-hmm. The only thing they don't have in Vancouver, they have one kosher butcher shop up Nitsky's. You know, that becomes hard when you want to buy something. You know, they don't have enough kosher food.
Oh yeah, I eat a lot of vegetarian now, and whatever we get, whatever meat we get from Toronto. Yeah.
How many Canadians are in the first year program? That's one question. And then also, you know, there's so much talk from other communities about the conservative movement and where we're headed and the downfall of the conservative movement. And I'd like to get a sense from the energy and enthusiasm of the rabbinical students of where you see conservative Judaism maybe in the next 15, 20 years.
It's a great question, Gail. It's my favorite question these days. I'll answer your first one first just to get it over with, but that's really my favorite question these days, and we spend a lot of time thinking about it. So thank you for asking it. I'm the only Canadian in the first year of rabbinical school. I actually think I'm the only Canadian in the rabbinical school at all right now, which is a little bit strange. There are usually more Canadians. I have a friend who's applying right now. He's from Montreal, so there will be more Canadians. But I think right now, just in this moment, it happens to be that I'm the only Canadian in the rabbinical school. Yeah, the movement is changing, and I'm really curious where it will go. As a student, we're right now the JTS as an institution is having a lot of it's changing a lot. We just got a new provost. We're looking for a new dean. We have a new chancellor, the first woman chancellor. So the institution itself is clearly going through a revision process and is looking to grow and change. I can't, as a first year rabbinical student, I can't speak for the whole movement, but I'm really happy to speak for myself and for my classmates. We are living in this tension of tradition and change. I'll share with you right now, we are learning in a halacha class, in a Jewish law class, about marriage, conversion, and divorce. And we are looking at the ritual of marriage and at the institution of marriage, and we are trying to find a way to balance traditional Jewish weddings and ceremonies with egalitarianism. And there's lots of different writing being written about how to do that. But what I like the most about what I'm learning is that maybe we actually had the I won't say his position, right? Something like that. His name is Rabbi Jacob Blumenthal. He's the CEO of the RA and the USCJ. He basically is in charge of the synagogues and the rabbis that fall under the conservative movement umbrella. Maybe some of you actually know more about it than I do, but anyways, he came to speak to our class, and he spoke about an idea of a library of teshuvos, a library of legal responses, such that we don't live as a movement only with one response to a legal question, but rather we offer multiple responses that fall in the umbrella of our values of balancing thing called tradition and this thing called change. And then each community can pick up one of those options that fall within our umbrella and take on what's good for them. So I'll go back to we're learning about marriage, and we're learning about marriage that can be egalitarianized within the traditional liturgy. We're also learning about marriage that can be actually just taken outside of the traditional structure and can become more egalitarian in that way. And both options are being presented in the conservative movement right now. And that, I guess, to answer your question, Gail, to me, that excites me the most, because it shows me that we are all doing work to think, and my classmates and I have, we pick up our phones after class and call each other, whoa, can you believe what that said? That was so not okay. We have to change that. Or wow, I feel really invested in this law, in this sense of tradition and reverence that I need to have for the text. And it's a conversation that we're having, and I'm really inspired by my classmates. They're thoughtful and progressive people who also deeply revere tradition and text. And we want to push and we want to make change, but we want to do it in a way that is not outside of halakha, is not outside of Jewish law, but from within. And I think a huge reason I chose JTS is because of that, because I have this desire to grow and to keep working on whatever this thing called change is, but balancing that with tradition. And at least for me, what I see it already starting to happen in the movement, and I just hope to continue to get to be part of it and to get to learn from it for now, and maybe one day add my voice to it too. And I hope that's it was a great question, and I have so many thoughts about it, but I hope that it came out sort of articulately. Yeah. I think I know it's 6:27, Ellen. I don't know if we have time for one more, or.
I don't know. Does anybody have anything?
Oh, so now that you're not in New York, are they helping you? In what ways are they making it a good year for you?
Actually, I feel really that the learning itself is just so intensive, but also so thoughtful that I really feel like it's getting me through this time, and in that way I'm finding deep joy. I spent 2 years in yeshiva at Pardes in Jerusalem before this, so I definitely know what it feels like to have my face stuck in a Gemara and a Talmud all day. But this learning is very different. This learning feels practical. So in that way, I think the learning, I'm so impressed with the teachers and being online on Zoom and transitioning their curriculum. They've just done such a fabulous job. I also, we have opportunities to just connect socially, which the school is providing, and I'm so grateful for that. Every Wednesday we have what we call community time over lunch, and everyone sort of eats together, and we either hear from a speaker or we get to discuss a topic or just have one-on-ones with each other and really just get to know each other. And that's been such a blessing. Just to it's a bit strange to get to know someone on Zoom, but I feel really connected to my classmates. And we've also worked hard at doing it ourselves, meeting offline and connecting outside of the classroom. But I'm really impressed with the way that JTS has both been sensitive of how much time we're spending on Zoom, but also has transitioned their curriculum and parts of their social curriculum to at least help meet our need of learning outside of the classroom, which is so hugely important.
Well, it's not easy for anybody, is it? It's right, Gail?
The Gamze Yavor, it will pass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It will. We'll get through it.
I guess I'm supposed to thank. It was really interesting to hear your journey. I also spent one winter in Israel at Pardes, and I found it very. It's in the middle, so therefore it wasn't too far right or left, as they say. And I have been to JTS before when I was vice president of Torah. And it's wonderful school, and they have wonderful teachers and rabbis, and we have every day we learn kind of what online, so we do learn. But anyways, thank you, and good luck.
Thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure to learn with all of you, and really a special thank you to Ellen for bringing me here and for having me, to Rabbi Walker and to Rabbi Ariella for making the connection, and really to all of the work you do to make my learning possible. Beth David Women is a really significant part of my learning through Torah Fund and what I get to benefit from. So I want to say thank you really from the bottom of my heart to all of you, and it's just such a joy to learn with you, and I hope I'll get to do it again soon.
And if we can ever travel, you can come. When you can ever travel, you can come to Toronto and actually come to Beth David. And
great, you're on.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Wow.
Well, we would love to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are you working at the academy now? Or are you visiting there? Or?
I do some sub work for them. It's been hard with COVID. It's hard to know. I live with my parents and they're older, and it's just hard to go into a day school. So I try to.
Are they?
They're open.
Oh.
Yeah. So I try to take up only the Zoom work.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you run into Abby Sherman, do you know Abby?
I'm very close with her. We put together her curriculum.
Oh, so my daughter was roommates with her when she lived in Toronto.
No, I have to tell Abby. That's so funny. Yeah, I'm very close.
It's Jen Marcus's mom.
Okay. Deal.
It's pretty small.
Jewish geography.
Jewish geography.
Yeah. Jewish geography.
I always find somebody. I don't know anybody.
And I said, you have to go on Who Knows One.
Right. Markham and Lisa Silver are also family.
Lisa was my substitute teacher for many years, and I took a law class at my Jewish day school. I grew up with Rebecca and Josh and Marco. Yeah. That's very nice.
Small world.
Good. Well, thank you again so much. Really such a pleasure. Good to meet you.
Thank you. No, thank you.
And all the best. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Ellen, I might have to buy a Torah pin.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
She was
saving it for the spring.
Someone send me an email what I have to do. I know nothing.
Can you buy them this year?
I don't know. I'll have to phone New York. We don't have them here in stock. They come from New York.
All right. So
I have mine on.
I don't need. I actually don't need a pin. I can just send a donation.
That's right. Tina,
okay, you can send $180, and you can send it to Beth David Women.
Okay.
Tina, my last check.
What is it, Tina?
7460 Bathurst Street, apartment 1404.
Hang on just a second.
Can I? Okay, I have to send a check is what you're saying.
Sorry, we're recording. Please don't put the address.
Oh, you know what? Okay, sorry. Gail,
Stop recording.
You can stop recording.
Tina? Oh, I'll call her.
Yes?